Okay, so this is the solution to your task 2, JavaScript. It says Top Tables needs to train one of their employees to maintain their website. The employee is developing a script to register users. To register for access to their account, each user needs to enter their details and create a password. Their password must be at least 5 characters long and must be entered twice to avoid entry errors. You're required to finish the script in the file jstask.html. The script must compare the passwords entered to check that they match, check that the passwords consist of at least 5 characters, display the messages to the user as specified in the file. The JavaScript code to check the passwords match has been started but does not work. You're required to correct and complete the script. Include programmer's comments to explain your corrections and additions. Save the file as password check underscore center number underscore candidate number. Now, whenever you are given the HTML, there are a few basic things that you need to do. Once you open up your web authoring package, in my case it's Macromedia Dreamweaver 8, we will import our file, the HTML file. We just drag and drop it. So by default it opens up the code. Do not go through the code. The very first thing that you need to do is check the design of your HTML. First, check the design. Identify the elements which are there. Now in this particular exercise, we can see that there is an element of the input box here. There's an element of another input box. There is a button being added. Button we have seen in the previous exercise as well, right? So the additional element or the additional element that is being added to this HTML is the input box. So that is your first step. It will give you an idea from where to start. 2. Again, you don't have to head over to your code. You are to view the HTML in your browser. So by pressing F12, you open this up in your browser and you need to test it out. Whatever works, whatever the initial HTML looks like. So for instance, this is basically about putting up passwords or checking passwords. So we enter the password as this and we click on submit. It says passwords do not match. So I can see that the button actually works. It may be calling a function and it is not performing correctly because the passwords are exactly the same. The message produced is incorrect. 2. For instance, if I just type in 3 characters in both the input boxes and I click on submit, it still says passwords do not match, and also it needs to test that the characters needs to be at least 5. Okay. So once viewing the design in your HTML in your web authoring package and your browser, then you head over to your code. That's step number 3. In step number 3, you need to identify all the elements and check the prerequisites whether they are there or not. Prerequisites matlab you need to check whether they are being named, and given IDs, because that is basically going to be used in your script. So first of all, in our design, one input box is this. We click on it and we come over to the code. So the input box text or the code gets highlighted. We can see that this is an input box. It has been given an ID of pword1. So the ID is already given. And I told you in the previous exercise that if the ID is not given, you specify it for the elements. And it has to be ID. It cannot be name. It cannot be something else. It needs to be ID, because get element by ID only works with ID. Do you got this? Now the default value is being set to empty. That means if we view it in a browser, the default value in this particular input box is going to be empty. Similarly, if I click on the second input box and head over to my code, the code gets highlighted and we can see that the ID is pword2, the default value is empty. You got this? For example, if the examiner says that it needs to have a default value, so what do? You add your default value over here. Let's say I'm going to add this. Within the speech marks, I've added it. If you want to see the impact of this, I can just hit F12, save my changes, and now you can see that the default value is already being added. You got this? I can still edit this, but the default value is basically specified in the code. So there may be a scenario that the examiner says that, okay, you need to have a default value for your input box. This is how you do it. Okay? Coming back, going to our code, removing the default value. This is done. Now let's check the other element, which is the button. So we'll select the button text, head over to our code, and you'll find the button tag. It says the type is the button. On click, it is basically calling this function, which is named as password check. The text on the button is submit, you know that, and this is where the button is ending. When I see that this is basically the function which is being called by the button, I head over to my script. Over here, I can see function password check, round bracket open close, curly bracket open here and closed over here. So the function syntax is complete and the button is also connected. They have added some lines of code over here, which we will review and correct. It says that you need to please correct the code. The comment is added by the examiner by himself. Okay, let's review it. It started with if. If syntax is the logical test is going to be enclosed in round brackets. Then you have the value of true, which is going to be enclosed in curly brackets. Then you have else, and then you have value of true or value of false, which is also enclosed in curly brackets. So let's bring that in the same format. After the round bracket, I'm going to hit enter. This is my value true, else this is my value false. Now look at the logical test. If round bracket open, exclamation mark basically means not. So this is incorrect. We are going to remove this. If the pword1 is equals to pword2, what is equals to pword1 and what pword2? Pword1 is basically the name of the input box. It does not signify the entry that is going to be made into the input box. Previous value or the previous exercise, it was the attribute source. We were defining a source element to our ID. Over here, it is actually checking the pword1 against pword2. That is basically against the ID pword1 and the ID pword2. We are not supposed to check the IDs. We are supposed to check the value which is going to be added to our input box. So हम क्या लिखेंगे pword1 dot value. If that value is equals to pword2 dot value, if they are equal, then the value true will happen. If true is stated as document.getElement by ID check1. Now what's check1? If you look up, you have these three IDs. One is check1, one is check2, one is result. Each on a separate line. Again, if you are to present your messages on a separate line, you remember in our initial or the let's say the start of the exercises or the start of the JavaScript, you were saying how can we have the messages on a separate line on the document? For that, you need to have separate lines on the HTML. You need to define those separate lines on the HTML. How do you do it? So let's say in the design, submit, my insertion point is over here. If I press enter 5 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, How many lines did I enter? 5. If I look at my code, look at this. There are 5 paragraph tags being added. So technically, when you press enter, you don't start a new line, you start a new paragraph, which is why the tag is labeled as P. And for this line, if I specify, okay, ID, this is going to be my line 1. Right? So this needs to be within the chevron of paragraph like this. So this is line 1. If I want the answer to be written in the line 2, I need to specify the ID for this as well. So this is my line 2. So I can specify different IDs to have my messages displayed on a particular line. First, we need to define those lines in our HTML, and then we can link it up with document.getElementById. So their answer is going to be placed at that same position. Anyways, so I'm going to remove this. Let's have the initial page being set by the examiner. So it says document.getElementById check 1. So it will fetch the ID check 1, which is here. Dot inner HTML. Inner HTML is the command used to enter text in place of what? In place of an ID. Which ID? Check 1. So it will fetch the check 1 and insert into the HTML this text. Do you get this? Huh? Within the HTML, if you are to place your text, so the property that we use is inner HTML. Of what? Of the ID. ID is already given. Dot inner HTML. It is case sensitive, so you need to be careful. Inner, INNER, all small letters, HTML all caps. It has to be in this format. Secondly, equals to speech marks. This is the value if true. Now, if the value of keyword 1 is equals to the value of keyword 2, what should be the message? Passwords match. Passwords do not match is incorrect. So I would say that passwords match. You get this? Okay. Else document.getElementById check 1 dot inner HTML. If that is not true, that means value 1, keyword 1 value is not equal to keyword 2 value. It should be passwords do not match. You got this? Yes. Now let's run and check this. Browser comes up. We're gonna type in our password. Both are same. If we click on submit, the message should be that the passwords match. Doesn't come. They may be. Wait. What? No. Over here, there is an extra bracket which had to be removed. Let's check again. I hope there are no more errors, because even if one single bracket is missing, it won't work. Or if there's one extra bracket being added, it won't work. So passwords match, and if I remove this character, click on submit, it says passwords do not match. So this is done. Second thing that we had to do. Look at this. Enter code to display password is too short if the password is less than 5 characters. Okay, that's very easy. I'm just going to use the same if condition, because why? The syntax is perfectly fine. You got this? Syntax is fine, which is why I'm going to copy this and enter the same condition over here as well. Now what are we testing? We are to test the number of characters of the input boxes. Now keyword1 dot value, further property added or further attribute added, dot length is what? Less than 5. For what? keyword1. keyword1 की value और उसके number of characters की length. If it is less than 5, at least 5 कहा हुआ ना उसने. At least 5 का मतलब क्या है? Okay, equals to 5 should be acceptable. Less than 5 is not acceptable. अच्छा, अगर p1 value length is less than 5 characters or p2 dot value dot length is less than 5 as well, either one of them, then what happens? The password is too short. And if they are equal or greater than 5, the value false would be a password is of perfect length. For now, we are just adding it for our convenience to check whether we get the desired value or not. However, this value is not to be displayed on check 1. This needs to be what? This needs to be over here. So fetch the value for check 2, ID check 2, and display the result over there on the next line. Do you get this? Let's test our code. If I type in this, now when I click on submit, first line should say that the passwords match. The second line should say that the password is of perfect length. Why? Because my name has 6 characters, which is more than 5. Okay, so we click on submit. So perfect length, and they match as well. Okay, if I reduce the number of characters, passwords match, but they are not of the perfect length, so it should display passwords match and password is too short, right? So click on submit. So it works. Let's move on. It has to follow the same syntax. It's case sensitive. Last of all, enter code to display the result. Please re-enter your password or password is stored. That means when they both are equal and their lengths are also equal to or greater than 5 characters, it should display that the password is stored. Right? And if one of them is not satisfied, it should say that you need to re-enter your password. If the passwords don't match, or if the length of the characters is less than 5, it should display that you need to re-enter password. So let's write the code ourselves. If round bracket open, curly bracket open, else curly bracket open close. So this I've fulfilled the syntax for if. Now I'm going to add the lines and the indentation. Okay, so p word, if p word 1 dot value is equals to p word 2 dot value and p word 1 dot value dot length is greater than or equals to 5. And p word 1 dot value dot length is also greater than or equals to 5. When this scenario happens, the values are equal, the lengths are greater than or equals to 5. When this happens, it should be document dot get element by ID. The ID is result. Very nice. It should be what? Dot inner HTML equals to password is saved or stored. Password stored. And if it does not happen, so we'll take this whole line, copy this and paste it as for false. I would say please re-enter password. So please re-enter password. Let's check this out. Wait, result keyword 2. Need to remove the extra brackets. Test this out. Passwords match. It's of perfect length. Password stored. What if I take one character off, take another character off? Keyword 1 value does not match with P2 value. P2 value, the length is less than 5. It should say passwords do not match. It is too short. Re-enter password. What if I take it this? They do match. Not a perfect length. So you need to re-enter password. So click on submit. Passwords match. Too short. Re-enter password. Do we all get this? Now I'm going to further fix this. P word, or let's say the check one, passwords match is fine. Passwords do not match, we don't have to notify. Or we do. We have to. Okay. What about passwords match? Now, if the error occurs, then it needs to be notified. When the error does not occur, it does not need to be. So password is too short, should be notified. Password is of perfect length, we don't need this. So we'll remove this. Password stored needs to be told. Password re-enter needs to be informed. Let's check. So we type in our password, click on submit. It says password stored. This makes sense. Okay. What if this happens? Submit. It does not match. Too short. Re-enter password. Okay. What about this? It is too short. Re-enter password. So it perfectly works according to the scenario. Take a good look at the code and keep the steps in mind. Whenever you open up HTML, look at the design in the web authoring, then open it up in the browser, have a feel of it, how does it operate, function kaise ho raha hai, then come, count the elements, check whether the elements have their IDs defined or not. If not, define those IDs, and then review the code if it is given to you, check your script, and then start working. That is from where you actually start. So this was the solution to your JS task 2.